Hi, my name is Chris Goldthorpe, and I want to talk about why people really win and lose their games. And it's not because they don't know the latest opening traps that they watch on the most popular YouTube channels. Actually, those do more to get you in trouble than to help you win more than just a few games by people who are uninitiated with your little trap. Later, they don't fall into your trap. Or you get the best of the opening only to blunder a piece 3 moves later. So opening knowledge should be applied by beginners, and by beginners I mean anybody under 1600. Um, Having deep memorized lines is so superficial that without the right ideas of how to continue into the middle game, even if you don't blunder, you're just as likely as your opponent to lose. So um, let's look at some real games and see how this works. For the most part, games are not won, they are lost. They are lost by the player who makes the single worst blunder, even if the other person made twice as many. So here's an example. Book opening so far, right? This could be a game between grandmasters. This is not the most popular move, but it's a decent move. And you notice that the evaluation up here says plus 0.3. That's worth quite a few rating points, actually. In fact, on this other computer over here, I'm going to see how many rating points plus 0.3 should be between strong players. Now, of course, between weaker players, plus 0.3 means about nothing. I've seen classic grandmaster games by the world's elite where there's a spread of more than 2 points from the highest for white to the best evaluation for black, where both sides were winning at one point or another, and then one side wins, where the game is a draw. So in any computer evaluation that's less than about 1 point either way is just not very relevant, especially when there's very little engagement and few pieces developed. So for anybody under 2400 to discuss whether this or that book opening, as long as we're talking about book openings, is one book opening being better than another, you're wasting your time. I mean, as long as you get your pieces out and get castled without losing material or creating a terrible permanent positional problem, you have just as good of a chance as when the game began, and that's very likely to change drastically with each of the many blunders on both sides that occur. So the way to embrace this truth is rather than to abhor it, but to make it your friend. For instance, if you're losing a little bit, don't worry. Wait for a blunder, but just make sure the next blunder is not yours. That attitude will do a lot more to win games for you than trying to keep up on the latest theory among the games that grandmasters play. Familiarity is much more valuable than theoretical strength. For example, very few grandmasters play the 4 knights game. And yet, if you are very accustomed to the 4 knights game and the 2 knights defense and the openings that come from trying to play it, then you are going to do a lot better with it against an opponent of your playing range of strength than playing, say, the Ruy Lopez or the Queen's Gambit because you heard it was quote-unquote better. Now, see, this is the kind of a bad move that just doesn't really make a lot of difference in practice unless both players are very strong. Black neglected to develop a piece. However, as the white pieces, if you say, well, what am I supposed to do about this? If you don't know, then you know, I don't think your real chances of winning here are that much better. And let's face it, since we can't see the future anytime we set odds on something, we say chances, it means we don't know what's going to happen. If I roll a die and say it's a 1 in 6 chance it's going to end up on a 6, well, actually it's either 100% or it's 0%. We'll know after we roll it. This is a foolish type of move when you have the bishop pair to just give it up for a knight. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So this bishop ended up moving 2 times. Now, is this the kind of mistake that's going to win the game for white? It'll help, but not very much. If we did a sort of a histogram graph of from 0 to say 1.3 on the evaluation here, and saw the chances of the player who was up winning with players in this approximate rating range that this game is in, I think you would find that plus 0.8 is not nearly half as good as plus 1.6, and both of them would be much less valuable than they would be in a game between 2 expert level players. So when you're, I would say below 1400, the only mistakes you really should be concerning yourself with are the ones where you give away a piece for a pawn or worse. Because as long as you don't make a move that is that bad, your actual chances of winning or losing are not very affected. It's when you give away a piece or a rook or allow someone to pin your queen with a bishop, then the odds change. So they both have 2 pieces developed, and they both have 7 pawns. And black again is implying he wants to trade a bishop for a knight, but white blundered a pawn. I would call it a blunder because it's pretty obvious, and he lost the pawn for free, and it lets black take control of the center. So that's why we see an evaluation that's better for black. However, if it stayed less than -1 for black, like minus 0.9 or something like that, less in amplitude, less in amount, I should say, then it's not really going to make that big of a difference. Now, in a game between 2 grandmasters, if it's -1, you could lay about 3 or 4 to 1 odds for black scoring. But among, you know, even 1800 level players, you'll frequently see where it might even be like -4 at some point during the game, and then white ends up winning. If I were the black pieces, I might find it useful to trade the knight for this bishop. This is not a bad bishop here, and this knight is unguarded. Okay, there black should have preserved his bishop, but he didn't have a bishop pair anyway. At least he didn't double his pawns here. And black is making a lot of wandering moves. There's no plan. But even that is not going to make much difference as soon as white blunders. and he could take the g-pawn for free. And trading queens first did make sense. Now he's threatening the rook. And it's useful to ask yourself during the game, if, and then say a color, were to win, how would it happen, most likely? And pay attention to who has what advantage. Black has a central passed pawn if he could ever get these pawns moving. And with only one minor piece each, if all the action is on one side of the board, and they both have pass pawns or potential pass pawns on the king side, then the knight might not be worse than the bishop. However, the most important factor, and I have not even seen this game yet, is when somebody's going to make a giant mistake. Like that one. That's a very simple mistake. White has two pieces guarding it, and black has only one defending it. So white can take this either way. It won't make a difference. And now we have +8, and even among players at this level, +8 is very significant. Okay, that's the one threat we knew he would want to make. He could have moved it just one forward. Now black can try to open the file. I think he might have forgotten that en passant is possible. Oh, okay. That pawn's not going to remain pinned. So he can just do this. And now he has to get his king out of there. Black can't put a rook on h8, so it's difficult for him to line up over here. But in any event, the king can root itself around this rook. Oh, right. This is the kind of blunder that loses games. White had this game completely won just a few moments ago. Look, it's +9.2, and then here. These are the kind of moves that, if they're removed from your gameplay, will have a real difference in your results. So this is just giving away a rook for free. Makes no sense at all. This is the kind of move that you can easily avoid just by checking your move mentally before you decide to make it. And black does not take the rook. And this right back to white totally winning again. So he's got to save his rook. And he does. So now he agrees to trade rooks. The only danger to white was black coordinating his rooks. And so now that danger is gone. And he's just taking free pawns now. Check. And he's just giving stuff away. I mean, some of the moves here on both sides are just beyond preposterous to a player who's just a little bit stronger. But the funny thing is, and people never believe this, but most of the time, if you ask the person who committed the blunder live, real time, during the game, what is your opponent going to do? They already knew you were going to ask. They already knew what the answer is. They say, oh, I gave away a piece. And they see it. So it kind of begs the question, well, why'd they make the move? And it's somewhat a matter just of self-discipline and being methodical. But it is blunders that determine who wins a game. Not openings knowledge or finding the latest trap in some obscure gambit. and white walked right into a checkmate. So this is what you have to fix in your game. But it begs the question, well, how do I do that? How do I fix it? Well, first of all, you have to kind of watch your time, because you know that if you start getting scared and you start having to move quickly, that easily produces blunders. But the least you can do before you move is know where your opponent has checks or captures, and just take a quick look at such moves before you make your move, and just scan with your eyes, look at other pieces, and you may suddenly notice an even better move. I mean, it'd be very easy. See, white was plus 15, and in one single blunder, it's a checkmate for black. This is typical. This is typical of most chess games. If you look at the chess games even of very strong players, there is very little correlation between how the players are doing after 20 moves and the final result of the game. Very little, even with the strongest players. In fact, even among strong computer programs playing each other, there's little correlation between how black is doing after black's 20th move and the final result of the game. So I invite you to try it out yourself. Go into a database and just find, say, the last 30 games of some world-class player. And then take your engine, and of all the games that last more than 20 moves, take the evaluation, put that in a column on your spreadsheet, and then take the final result of the game, which is 1 or 1/2 or 0, and just see how much of a correlation there is. And you might be very surprised at how little there is. So that means that even at the very high levels, having a perfect opening just might, at best, keep you from getting in trouble in the opening. For beginners, the only purpose of studying an opening is just to define an opening repertoire and to avoid just getting a horrible position right away. So let's go back and look at this from the beginning. Okay, let's suppose you're the white pieces and you never saw this before. Because if you're a stronger player, you just immediately go, oh, it's the Caro-Kann, and you play d4 or whatever your favorite move is here. And you don't need to do any thinking, and you already know that. But there's scarcely any mistake that can be made at this point because there's no pieces to come out and give check. If white moves this pawn, there's a check over here. So one thing that's useful to remember is wherever a piece can give check, it is often as though there is another copy of that piece on that square. So as soon as white moves this pawn, he should try to be aware of, do I have any square over here that I don't want the black queen to go to? Like if it went there right now, would it be bad for me? Right now, no. All these pawns are guarded and, you know, nothing really out yet. So white develops a piece. Maybe he's trying to play the two knights variation of the Caro-Kann, or he doesn't know what to do and just develops a piece. But this is a reasonable move either way, and it's not terrible. So you have to know at what point do I have to start getting more careful. I would say as soon as your opponent has more than two minor pieces out into this central area, or affecting pieces that are in this central area, then you have to be very careful and make sure that you at least look at all checks and captures. That alone will keep you away from most blunders. And like I said, avoiding blunders at a lower level is 99% of winning. I knew a scholastic player who, when he was 1200, he used to beat 1600s just because he was patient and calm. He would get into situations where he was a whole piece down, and then he would end up successfully setting a trap and winning, say, the person's queen by pinning it with a bishop, and then he's ahead, then he's winning again. Or getting the person to make a mistake where he gets to do a back rank mate. Now, if black didn't know this position, he should have considered pushing this pawn up because it makes a capture threat. And in the beginning of the game, whenever you don't know what to do, look for developing moves, but then look to see if they are safe. Make sure you look at checks and captures. Notice I'm not talking about opening variations here. You know, I could talk about the details of the Caro-Kann 2 Knights variation, but even if you're a stronger player, then your opponent is going to be likely about your strength too. And so often, the moment your opponent makes a quote-unquote mistake, your next move is even worse than theirs. Yeah, now this is a concept error, but look who ended up winning the game. Black ends up winning the game, even though white was at like plus 15 at some point. Okay, you should know certain tricks that help you to think more quickly. One of them is simply counting. For instance, if this pawn wasn't guarding this, well, the queen is, but a knight and a bishop, neither one of them is worth as much as the queen. In fact, the queen is worth more than the both of them put together. So if white has two attackers and black has only one defender, white can just take it. In fact, if black were guarding this pawn only with a single minor piece, with two minor pieces attacking it, he normally can consider taking it. But then you want to see, well, what happens after that? For example, the queen can go here with a check. Also, whenever a line is about to open, we have to see, well, what does that mean? For example, if white captures twice here, this pawn will be out of the way. That means if the queen goes here, the king will be in check. So it might temporarily be as if he has two queens. Now, if there's anything that you can do with one of them, then it's as if you have some advantage. But otherwise, it's not really like you have two queens. So castles, is, as you can see, is not a terrible move for him. Okay, there's some, see, he can know that this is a safe move because for one attacker, there's one defender. But the queen would not be guarding the pawn anymore. So he would get a bishop and a pawn for the rook. Now, simply counting points is not always the best way to know if a move is good or not. When one side has a lot more development than the other, you might be able to see, well, what did the pieces do in those positions? Okay, so they're developing pieces, and that was just a blunder here. This is the kind of blunder you make because your attention is on one factor alone. White sees that his knight is pinned, and he wants his knight to not be pinned. And he was afraid that if he castled, black would double his pawns. He should not be afraid of that because it makes his center strong, and he can use this file and put the rook there. That's a matter of more sophisticated knowledge and experience. But even if you're not a strong player, you know that the knight and bishop are about equal. And it's not going to be a big deal to have doubled pawns here when you have both bishops. especially if your opponent has 0 bishops. But this cuts off the queen's protection to the pawn, so yeah, he should take it. And now black should trade his knight for the bishop. But again, it's not a big deal whether he does or not. Like, for example, if he does, the evaluation will still be about the same. Yeah, just about the same. So, yeah, white should not have allowed it, but that's not the important part. The most important mistake that white made in this whole game is when he moved his king to a position where it could be checkmated. So if you're the kind of player who might make such a mistake, there's more to gain for you by simply checking for that on every single move in detail without thinking about much else than to try to play the latest opening. Right, so this knowledge that was missing from black, the knowledge that we don't normally want to trade bishops for knights in the opening, in the end, didn't hurt him. Now at +3, white should just win here. I wouldn't give it +3 myself. They both have 6 pawns. They both have a queen, 2 rooks, and 2 minor pieces. So I wouldn't say it was +3, maybe +1, just because white has good control of the center. But I don't think, it doesn't seem that good to me. And then he gets another pawn. Okay. So, yeah, I think I would have judged it to be about +2, but maybe +1.5, because these are doubled pawns. That would make it like 2.5. 5 to 6. Yeah. Yeah, white has an extra pawn, and this is like another half. So, yeah, I would think that it would be like 1.5. Very predictable. Another thing that players like to do at lower levels, maybe even not such low levels, is they almost always, when they have the opportunity, opt for a move that simply makes a 1-move capture threat without considering, am I really getting my piece that made the threat into a better position? Or am I just playing hope chess and like hope he doesn't see it? Yeah, this is the kind of move that maybe black was looking at this pawn thinking, oh, well, I'll go here and take his pawn. He never did, clearly he never thought about, well, if I go here, what can white do? And the first thing you think of are checks and captures, and the only thing that can be captured is this knight. So it would not have taken much thinking for black to avoid that big mistake. And now that white takes it, even in a game between beginners, we should guess that this is like 2 to 1 that white's going to win. There's a threat, but he can just play g3. g4 is not as good, I don't think, because of f5. And he does it. Now black can just do this en passant capture, and he goes after the pawn. Now it's true that this pawn is pinned, and that's why he can't capture the rook. But he kind of just gives the pawn away. But this is an amazing mistake here. You know, because the pawn is not far away from the rook here. So I think he's just staring down this row here and just temporarily ignored this square. But you could see that even if they were playing bullet chess here, white should be able to go, wait a minute, he'll just take my rook. And then black doesn't see it. Absolutely incredible. So these are the kind of moves that make the difference. That's just a trade. The rest of this we've already seen. Yeah, I can't find any purpose to that move at all. Even if you're playing very quickly, it's not a good idea to say, move a piece where it attacks his queen, even though it's undefended, and then hope he moves real quick, and then you get his queen. Not unless you're losing super badly, and that's the only reasonable chance. Well, the only chance you have, unreasonable though it may be, of winning. Now, any move that white has going backwards here is okay. But it's plus 72. I didn't know you could even have an evaluation that big. But all he had to do before he made that move is notice the check and go, oh, wait, I can't go there. I'll be checkmated. Okay? So these are the things that actually matter in your games. Not being able to solve the real tough puzzles, not knowing a whole lot of theory that will ultimately have almost no effect on the result of the game. And it's not knowing a bunch of fancy endgames that you never get to play. What makes a difference in your game is simply avoiding the giant blunders. And if you just look for checks and captures, you'll avoid most of them. So, hopefully this is going to help your play. Maybe you want to play a game right now. Every time before you make a move, just look to see if there might be something better and ask yourself, if I make this move, what can my opponent do? Make sure you notice checks, captures, and threats. Those aren't the only kind of moves you need to notice, but at very least, notice those. You could do that even in a blitz game. Good luck in your chess. Take a look at Weston, W-E-S-T-O-N, chess tutoring. Also, chrischess.com. And if you're on Lichess, which I used to make this video, join my team room, Chris Chess. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like.